If you're tired of overeating and binging, especially while trying to lose weight, you need to watch this. Hey everyone, I'm Abbey Sharp. Welcome to Abby's Kitchen. In today's video, I will be talking about binge eating, overeating, and the most common clinical eating disorder, binge eating disorder, or BED. Why you're struggling and how to stop. A big thank you to Erin Davis today for her expert support on the research. Erin is one of my recommended RDs for weight inclusive care, so I highly recommend reaching out if you're looking for some one-on-one support. Also, be sure to check out my disclaimer below, as obviously we're going to be talking about disordered eating, and also you can find my link to download my free Hunger Crushing Combo ebook. Okay, first I need to tell you about my sponsor today, BioTrust. So I've spoken about the emerging research on collagen a number of times in the past, and the last time we checked in on this, I said that the research is finally at a point where I'm confident it's more than just hype. We now have lots of quality data and recent reviews confirming its use for skin health. So collagen is uniquely rich in hydroxyproline, proline, and glycine, which appears to help with signaling skin cell proliferation and hyaluronic acid synthesis, both of which can help to support skin elasticity. So in addition to a balanced varied diet, I personally have been incorporating collagen into my beauty and wellness routine. I love BioTrust Ageless Multi-Collagen Plus Turmeric Powder because it contains a blend of 5 different types of collagen for full body support beyond just skin and joints. It specifically has type 2 collagen, which a lot of collagen brands don't have, which is the type that helps to support joint health. They also were really smart and added in the amino acid tryptophan, which together makes BioTrust Blend a uniquely complete protein. And another feature that sets them apart is the turmeric. So turmeric has powerful antioxidant properties and supports a healthy inflammatory response, further amplifying the skin, joint, and even gut health benefits. And honestly, the turmeric-based golden milk blend with cinnamon and ginger in there just tastes so amazing. You can mix it into hot or cold liquid, but I'm partial to making it into my afternoon pick-me-up tea. So if you want to check out BioTrust, click the link in my description to get up to 51% off of your order plus free shipping, along with a 60-day money-back guarantee. And thank you again to BioTrust for sponsoring this video. Again, don't forget to check out the link in the description to get 51% off of your first order, plus free shipping and a 60-day money-back guarantee. Okay, so first of all, what is the difference between overeating and an actual ED like binge eating disorder? Well, first of all, everyone overeats on occasion. Even like the most seasoned intuitive eater will occasionally eat past the point of fullness, you know, on like holidays when your aunt's stuffing looks really extra good, or like you're at your grandma's and you don't want to offend her, etc.
No, I couldn't have enough. Okay, one more. I'm gonna have one more and then that'll be it.
Occasionally eating more calories than your body needs is ultimately just part of normal healthy eating. In stark contrast, BED is a diagnosable eating disorder in the DSM-5 that's defined as episodes of consuming an above normal amount of food within any 2-hour period, at least once a day a week for at least 3 months. And these eating episodes need to be accompanied by an overwhelming feeling of a loss of control, where you feel like you cannot stop the binging episode no matter what. Even when you don't meet the DSM criteria for binge eating disorder, your binge eating may also be considered disordered eating because it's interfering with your quality of life. So we're going to be talking about why you're in the cycle and what you can do about it. So binge eating is often related to difficulties in emotional regulation. And there are a number of potential triggers that can encourage that switch to flip and for us to use food as our primary or sole way to cope. Number 1, genetics and brain physiology. So I have to touch on this first because sometimes it's just reassuring to know that you didn't do something to cause this. Like, it's very much how I felt when I got my ADHD diagnosis. Like, finally, I felt like I could stop gaslighting myself that, you know, I was just too sensitive, or I was too weak, or too emotional, or I had poor willpower, etc. So we now know that folks that have binge eating disorder or binging tendencies tend to demonstrate low serotonin and dopamine levels and abnormalities in serotonin and dopamine receptors in the brain. Since these neurotransmitters are essentially involved in the pleasure systems in our brain, folks with chronic deficiencies may experience greater reward outputs from pleasure sources like food. Number 2, psychiatric conditions and neurodiversity. So binge eating is heavily correlated with mood disorders like depression and anxiety, and also with neurodiversity like ADHD and autism. So I talked about that a little bit in my ADHD video right here, but research suggests that 20 to 30% of folks with ADHD will have an eating disorder, and binge eating is typically the most common. There's likely a brain genetic component that we talked about, but there's also questions about what comes first, the ED or the other psych disorder, because often, food becomes a way to harness some control or pleasure or an escape. Number 3 is stress and mood. So obviously, as we talked about, there's the clinical anxiety disorder piece, but research also suggests that higher levels of perceived stress has been shown to result in a desire to binge. In women specifically, having a stressful episode in your day would significantly increase the risk of a same-day binge, where having good social support could help decrease it. Number 4 is perfectionism. So a very common psychiatric comorbidity is BED and OCPD, aka obsessive compulsive personality disorder, which is basically grounded in this idea of perfectionism. And there are a number of different types of perfectionists, but the research suggests that the most at risk for binging are those that are particularly concerned by others' approval or criticism. Binge eating is often used to escape feelings of loneliness or failure or sadness, or the discouraging and critical reality that a perfectionist faces every single day. And to do that, you basically need to set aside higher order thought and really ground yourself in something visceral and immediate. And the experience of eating something delicious, the smelling and the chewing and the tasting, this is a primal way for a perfectionist to find that escape. I'm actually working on a whole video on perfectionism as it pertains to your diet. So if you're interested in learning more, definitely leave me a comment below if you can relate. Number 5 is the gut microbiome. So this is really interesting to me, but basically the gut microbiome is often thought of as the second brain, and we now have a lot of emerging studies suggesting that imbalances in gut flora may be associated with binge eating and obesity. So for example, one study found that a decrease in specific bacteria species like Akkermansia and Intestimona species, and an increase in Bifidobacterium Anorexia, I think it's called, Anorexia. These were associated with binge eating disorder. And this is all leading to a whole emerging field of using probiotics as a potential treatment for eating disorders. And if you stick around, I will tell you exactly what strain to look for. Number 6, family upbringing and attitudes around food. So obviously, childhood trauma and abuse is associated with binge eating because, again, as you can imagine, food becomes a much needed escape. And there are other potential psychosocial triggers for binge eating, including physical and sexual abuse and discrimination. But to focus for a moment on childhood and parental upbringing, we know that parental attitudes and behaviors around eating can play a significant role. So outside of the context of neurodiversity or other pathologies, healthy children are ultimately born intuitive eaters. They know when they're hungry and they know when they're full. And countless studies now have looked at the risk factors for eating in the absence of hunger and how that in turn can increase the risk of overeating, binge eating, and obesity in adolescence and adulthood. So as you can imagine, diet restriction in early childhood tends to increase the likelihood that older children and adults will overeat when they get the chance. I mean, this to me is just basic evolutionary human nature, right? We've been conditioned to not be fed when we're hungry. Then when we finally do get access, we're gonna overdo it. And this isn't just about food quantity in cases of food insecurity, where one study found that food insecurity increased the risk of binging by 40%, but we're also talking about food quality and variety. And this is really why I so often talk about the problems with the almond mom trope, right? Restricting our kids so aggressively will always backfire and cause the opposite of intended effects. Kids who are put on diets end up significantly at a higher risk of obesity, binge eating, dieting, unhealthy eating behaviors, and poor body image years later. So yeah, this is a kind of biggie for me because I feel that it's one that we so easily can avoid with the next generation. Another potentially avoidable or modifiable factor is social media use. And this is really not surprising, and it's definitely one of the reasons why I do what I do here. But one recent review at the literature found that social media use was directly or indirectly associated with binge eating. The more participants use social media, the more likely they would have increased intentions to eat and binge. And this may have to do with social comparison, constant body surveillance through nonstop video creation, and the proliferation of misinformation on social media apps. I mean, again, this is exactly why I do what I'm doing right now, and it would require a whole video for me to fully unpack. So definitely let me know in the comments if that's of interest to you. But I really think it's no secret that TikTok is not good for anyone's mind or body for that matter. Not that I want you to not follow me or watch my videos, but honestly, if this were all to disappear, I wouldn't be mad. And then finally, we of course need to talk about restriction and dieting. You guys knew I wasn't gonna skip this one. So research consistently suggests that restriction or dieting is one of the greatest predictors of a binge. Dieters are 2 to 3 times more likely than non-dieters to develop binge eating habits within 5 years. If you guys are a regular here on Abby's Kitchen, you probably heard me talk about the binge restrict cycle. Basically, you go on a diet, aka you restrict, which then leads you to obsess over food or what you're no longer allowed to have. Then when you get a moment of opportunity, just a little taster, you can't help yourself but to binge and overeat, like the floodgates are open and you can barely get your fill. And this of course then leads to feelings of guilt and shame, which brings you right back to the restriction. Rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat.
I'm not going to stop the wheel. I'm going to break the wheel.
Obviously, not everyone who goes on a diet will end up with a binge eating disorder, but in addition to how strict your diet is, it does seem that having feelings of depression or low self-esteem are particularly salient factors in driving up the risk. So hopefully now you can pinpoint one or more reasons why you binge. But of course, now you're thinking, what the do I do about it? Now, obviously, what strategy is really going to move the needle for you may depend on your why. But I want to share with you some evidence-based recommendations and tips that are used every day in clinical settings with dietitians and therapy teams. So, step number 1, journal your food and binging episodes. So you can just do this in a basic line journal, or there are a lot of great mindful eating journals that you can buy, like this one that I saw on Etsy. But I want you to journal what you ate, when you ate, where you were, your hunger levels, how satisfied you felt afterwards, and how it affected your mood. You don't need to be specific like you would if you were like tracking calories. We don't need to know specifics of exactly how much oil you added or any kind of calorie counting or anything like that. But I want you to take notice of how satisfied you're allowing yourself to be. How hungry did you let yourself get before eating? How full were you when you stopped? Are there particular foods that you're obsessing over or particularly tempted to overeat? Notice if these episodes are accompanied by other non-food triggers. So like a fight or a stressful day at work or really bad news or a specific place or person. And I also want you to take note of how soon you're thinking about food again between meals. As we've established, binging triggers are highly individualized, but understanding your personal patterns is the first step to fixing them. So now you got some data, let's talk about ways to incorporate acts of self-care that can downplay some of these triggers. Scenario number 1, you're binging on specific foods or food groups like carbs. The solution? Habituate, habituate, habituate. This is probably going to be the most difficult piece of advice that I give here, but also probably the most important for the most amount of people. If we continue to put food on a pedestal so far out of reach, we are going to obsess. Like, it's human nature to want to seek out the forbidden fruit. So don't make it forbidden anymore. And this is the whole crux of my video series on turning fear foods into hunger crushing combos. Like, I talked about how when I was struggling with my eating disorder, I would binge on cereal. It was a bad food in my mind. So I made the choice to eat cereal every day as part of my recovery. First it was just like a handful, then it was a bowl, and then eventually it just became another food that I could comfortably pair with other foods to make it more satiating. AKA, I could put my Lucky Charms on like some Greek yogurt with some fruit and call it a balanced meal. If you want to stop the binge restrict cycle, you have to nip it in the bud here, not here. So for those of you guys who are trying to lose weight, I hear you, you're thinking, well then I will never see improvements on the scale. But in response, I would ask, what is the point of losing and gaining the same 5 to 10 pounds because you're restricting too hard, too fast? So this might mean having a slower, more realistic weight loss goal and also finding ways to incorporate the foods that you really love into your daily plan. So I definitely recommend rewatching my Fear Food series because it will give you some ideas on how to eat nutrient-dense meals that can still support weight loss without pulling the reins so tight you eventually binge. Scenario number 2, you binge when you let yourself get too hungry before a meal. So the solution here, very common. I want you to set an alarm on your phone to eat every 2 to 3 hours. Having a solid structure in your routine can really help to alleviate the chaotic nature of the binge because you can be confident that you will be fed very soon. Scenario number 3, you binge when you're overtired or overworked. Now, an obvious solution to this would just be to make a priority to start your bedtime routine earlier so that you can get a better sleep. And there are so many reasons why sleep is important for overall health, but also for appetite management. Scenario number 4, you notice that there are specific places or people that trigger a binge. So let's say that you always overeat when you're with your in-laws. In this case, I want you to ask yourself, how can you be more prepared? Maybe this means having a solid hunger crushing combo snack before you go, or rehearsing responses for if your family pressures you to eat more. Scenario 5, you're triggered by social media content online. Always a good idea to do like a monthly feed detox to remove any triggering accounts or content creators from your feed that you do not feel support your goals. You can also set self-care boundaries for yourself for when you can go on your apps and when you can't. That's definitely something that has helped me a lot in my journeys. Scenario number 6, your binges line up with particularly stressful moments. So this for me is about finding time to explore other non-food coping strategies. Mindfulness practices and meditation have been shown to help reduce binge eating episodes, but you can also consider other non-food coping strategies like going for a walk or talking to a friend or window shopping, baking, reading, swimming, or any other pleasurable act or hobby that can help to diffuse the urgency to binge. And finally, maybe your binges seem to be related to a mental health or neurodivergency related episode. So the solution here is obviously not a quick fix, but seeking supports for those conditions should be your priority. So cognitive behavioral therapy and interpersonal psychotherapy have been proven effective at treating binge eating disorder, and the medication Vyvanse, which is also used for ADHD, has also been approved specifically for binge eating. I also mentioned earlier that probiotic therapy is currently being studied, and I'm really particularly excited about this. And we do have some early research that suggests that supplementing with Lactobacillus rhamnosus probiotic may help to reduce binge eating tendencies. So, as I said, the solution to binge eating is never going to be black or white or stagnant. It's going to be likely a journey and one that is highly individualized. So I do encourage you to seek out professional support when you can. Again, I'm gonna leave a link to Erin's website below. But I would love to hear from you guys about what has helped you with your binge eating tendencies, whether in the past or currently. So if you're up to it, please leave a comment below. And on that note, I gotta cook some pancakes. If you guys like this video, be sure to give it the thumbs up. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and hit up my description for my free hunger crushing combo ebook. And I'll see you next time on Abby's Kitchen. Bye.